blocking and tackling the fundamentals. So while promoting this new aspect of left-hand engineering and trying to learn and appreciate the value that it brings to an organization, I've been in search for analogies and metaphors as to what can we relate this to, and how is it really going to implant in a business owner so that the light bulb goes on to say, hey, we got to be thinking in this mentality. Let's switch gears and let's retool so that we're getting ready for tomorrow. So I had heard of something that was going on the West Coast in the world of the National Football League. And I don't know who's done research on what lately, but the Seattle Seahawks, their defense has been phenomenal for almost the past 10 years now. And until recently, I wasn't 100% sure as to why. And for me, this is a super cool analogy because I appreciate athletics. I understand putting in hard work to get to the level that those guys get to. They're extremely talented. Their work ethic is superior. And then they have to apply the brains of the game to really accelerate and be successful at that level. And so Pete Carroll has been in Seattle for quite some time now. I want to say a little bit after 2010. And from that early 2000, I think it was 10 to 14 or 15, they had quite a few runs to the Super Bowl, one winning. The other one they lost, as we all know, at the end zone with a questionable call, but that's beside the point. What I want to focus on is Seattle's defense. It has been superior throughout this time, and I figured out why. And I didn't necessarily come to any conclusions, but looking at what Pete Carroll did was a huge eye-opener to me in the way we need to think about running businesses. So there has been some talk about the way football players tackle, and when tackling was further developed in the NFL, it was done in the 80s, and the lead with your head style tackling was taught. And the theory behind that was, one, there wasn't much theory behind it, but hey, let's use the head itself because it's protected by a helmet as another appendage to stop that defender or that offensive player from advancing forward on the field. Now, fast forward, you can see the ramifications of teaching how to tackle in this aspect. The CTE, the amount of concussions and blow after blow on these NFL players is taking a toll in not a healthy way. So one of Pete Carroll's defensive coordinators decided to study rugby. Now, if you look at the concussion ratio of rugby players versus NFL players, it's not similar at all. You'd think a sport with that much contact and that strong of individuals is going to have a lot of concussions with no pads or no real helmets, but that's not the case. Rugby, the concussion level, it just isn't as high as the NFL, and they couldn't figure out why. So one of Pete Carroll's guys studied how rugby players tackle. And they found from a fundamental standpoint, they tackled completely different. Reason being, they didn't have the pads to tackle and absorb those blows. No helmets, no shoulder pads. So they had to tackle fundamentally efficiently. And in doing so, they developed this strike zone to hit below the shoulder and above the knee of this zone. And then from there, the body position, their hip placement of how they make contact with that opposing player is completely fundamentally different. And so Pete Carroll, or his defensive coordinator team, they made a series of videos and retaught their defense how to tackle. Now, think about that. An NFL organization reteaching its players on defense how to tackle. For me, it's such a cool data point and observation. And what happened was one of two things. Well, one, concussion rates went way down. Over the years they implemented this, they were the second fewest team of concussions. Well, what about the other advantages to this? Well, now that they're fundamentally tackling different and more efficiently, their defense got better. And you can see it with the Super Bowl runs that they made. So Pete Carroll and his team came out with a bunch of different videos to spread the word throughout the NFL, throughout collegiate, high school, and juniors. The reason being, one, it's a more efficient way of tackling, and two, it substantially reduces the risk of head impacts. And there's various other studies that have come out, and I know a team. I read an article. A team in New Hampshire ran a study throughout the course of the year. Half of the team wore helmets while practicing, the other half didn't. And the team that wore helmets was able to go about in their normal football ways, but the second half, if they couldn't wear helmets, well, they can't lead with their head anymore, or else they're going to get hurt. And so they had to apply these new tackling styles. And so then their contact ratios were measured throughout the year when playing in games, and it was found that team that practiced without helmets on had 30% less head blows throughout the season. So again, just a really cool analogy of teaching the fundamentals. And even at the highest level, you might need to restart and rethink how you're approaching the game. And just a great example of Pete Carroll and his team having one of the best defenses in the NFL, proven by Super Bowl runs, and what it can do if you take a step back and relearn things from the fundamentals.